What is the difference between a population and a sample? The population is the entire group of individuals we want information about. A sample is the subset of individuals in the population from which we actually collect data. A census collects data from every individual in the population. A census is ideal if we have a small population. For example, I just want to get information about the opinions of people in my statistics class. I would certainly ask everyone. I would take a census. But often that is not practical, so we use a sample from a larger population to collect information that would give us some insight into the population. The video icons in the book will tell you certain sections of the book that have videos from the textbook publisher available. So there's videos that give you answers or explanations to things that are very helpful. So we're going to start out by talking, how do you sample badly? One type of bad sample is a convenient sample. A convenient sample is just taking whatever's handy as your sample. So for example, if you wanted to find out what the average number of hours that students in your high school study per evening, it wouldn't be a good idea to walk into the library and take the first 15 individuals you see, because that group in the library is probably not representative of the population. There may be a bias in the results, because probably those people in the library are your more studious students, and they probably tend to study more hours than the overall population studies. So this would result in a bias that would overrepresent or overestimate, the number of hours that students study per night. So bias is any study is caused by a flaw in the design of the study. So if the study consistently overestimates or underestimates the value you want to know, then that study design has bias. An example of bias was choosing words non-randomly, or I should say an example of a design flaw in a study was choosing words non-randomly from the Federalist Papers, because we found that would consistently overestimate word length. People don't choose enough small words. They tend to choose one small, one medium, one large, or so forth, and that ends up overestimating the word length. Another type of a bad way to sample is a voluntary response sample. That is just meaning that participation in the sample is voluntary. An example of that would be an online or a TV poll where they say text in your answer. The two problems that cause bias in a voluntary response sample is, first of all, the sample is probably not representative of the population. If if people were watching CNN and they were asked a political question, there would probably be a bias in favor of a certain political party, because certain political people who have certain political views tend to watch CNN. Same thing with Fox News. People with certain political views tend to watch Fox News. So there would be a bias just by who's watching. If you do an online poll, there would be a bias as to which types of people tend to be on which websites looking at the poll. Another bias is that people with strong and usually negative opinions are more likely to respond to any kind of voluntary response poll. People who don't care one way or the other, they're not going to bother to respond. People who feel very strongly, and particularly that they have a feeling that things need to be changed, that we don't like things the way they are, they're going to respond. And so that is going to cause bias in the results. The results will not represent the overall population. Another feature in the book that's really helpful is the Check Your Understanding feature. That's a good way to test your understanding of the important concepts. The answers will be available at the click of a button on the ebook. There'll be a place underneath on the ebook, underneath each Check Your Understanding, that will say click for answers. So you can test yourself by answering the questions and then check your answers immediately. Now, to test yourself, I would like you to write out the answer to this. To estimate the proportion of families that oppose budget cuts to the athletic department, the principal surveys families as they enter the football stadium on Friday night. And this would be the proportion of families in that particular high school. Explain how this plan will result in bias and how the bias will affect the estimated proportion. Okay, so how does this plan cause bias? how the bias will affect this estimated proportion. So I'm going to go ahead and show the answer, but you might want to pause the video and just check, see what you can come up with and then check my answer. This is a convenient sample. Families that attend football games are probably interested in athletics, so they are likely to oppose cuts to the athletic budget. Such a sample would most likely overestimate the proportion of all families that oppose cuts to the athletic budget. So that's a complete answer. Tells what kind of, why the sample is not a good sample. It's going to result in a bias. These particular families tend to all have the same type of opinion about the issue, and so the overall proportion is not going to be a correct estimate. It's going to be an overestimate in this case. So those are examples of ways to sample badly. In our next video, we'll look at ways to start looking at ways to sample correctly.